Media that are considered to be cult classics often end up being pretty good. These movies and games are not necessarily bad, but were received poorly and all around just didn't do that well when they first released. And gaming is covered in small little cult followings that love their favorite game or franchise. One of these is Beyond Good and Evil, an action-adventure game from 2003 that was kind of a mashup of different genres, offering some Zelda-like dungeon design, Metal Gear Solid-esque stealth elements, and the like. Its sequel/prequel has been in development hell for years, if it's gonna get made at all. But the original game has once again been remastered and brought to newer platforms. So let's dive into the first time this game has been available on a handheld console. Here is my review of Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition for the Nintendo Switch. This story takes place on a planet in the middle of a war between an alien race that kidnaps people and the Alpha Sections, a military force seemingly there to protect the citizens. You play as Jade, a young woman living with her uncle in a set of orphans. After surviving an alien attack, she's recruited by rebel faction Iris to uncover a conspiracy about the Alpha Section supposedly working with the aliens and not against them. We then follow Jade and her uncle as they infiltrate factories and other Alpha installations to take photographic evidence of the alleged human trafficking that's going on. I found this story to be pretty good. Jade's story is well done, and while some of the side characters are a little more than, hey, look at me, I'm here too and I look like this, there is a lot of charisma from the cast, especially from Paige, the very opinionated pig uncle of Jade, and the leader of Iris that you meet early in the game. When it comes to gameplay, this is an action-adventure game with stealth and photography elements. As you play, you'll explore 3D locations and solve puzzles, sneak past enemies, and fight enemies. As far as what's different here in 20th Anniversary Edition, not really that much has changed with gameplay. The game's visuals got smoothed over and improved, and we now have a speedrun mode that allows you to go through the game as quickly as possible with no way to save your progress. We've also got a gallery showing concept artwork and little videos of scrapped levels and designs. But let's get to the game itself. It's an action-adventure game, but has a lot of different gameplay mechanics thrown here and there that make it feel like sort of its own thing. Your main goal is to do missions. You got this large overworld with different places you can go, like a city with races and NPC areas, and various locations that are more difficult to reach where the actual missions take place. You navigate most of this with a hovercraft that can surf over water, shoot at enemies, and dock in various locations so you can explore on foot. And you have a boatload of side missions to do in this game, from hovercraft races to going through secret facilities in order to find and defeat enemies that are holding the pearl currency that is needed for a lot of story-oriented items and upgrades. This game actually does have a pretty big emphasis on side missions, as a couple times in the game you'll get to a point where you need pearls to be able to get upgrades for story progress, and you'll have to go out and explore to find side missions to get those pearls. You also use your camera a lot. One of the biggest side missions in this game is just taking pictures of wildlife on the planet. Literally anything that is alive can be submitted and you get currency for it. Every area of the game has wildlife, which includes NPCs, enemies, and bosses. It can be tricky to find a good opening for a camera shot while in the middle of a boss fight, but it is emphasized as many of these can be missed. Now let's get into dungeons and how you navigate them. You wander 3D dungeons with a mix of puzzle solving, combat, and stealth. Your goal in the dungeon is to find evidence of what the Alpha Sections are doing so the government can expose them for what they truly are. But to get there, you need to solve puzzles and tackle enemies. The puzzles are fairly simple. You hit a switch and a door opens. Push an object to a wall to climb it and get into the next area. Get your ally to stand on a pressure pad next to you. And it almost has a Zelda-like feel to it at first. You get to a dungeon, ally shows a power that helps stun enemy and solve puzzles. Then you get a glove for projectiles that puzzles and a boss fight are centered around using. But the further you go, the fewer items are introduced, having you instead figuring out more inventive ways of using what you have to get past enemies, like shooting a flying disc at a faraway switch to activate it. The camera is also used here, having you take pictures of not just story things you need to send for the mission, but also barcode door locks that the governor can decode for you, and scanning maps to be able to save them. And then we get to combat. It's kind of hack and slash. When fighting enemies, you have a 3-hit combo with Jade's staff or a charging attack that can hit everything around her as she spins around. You can also dodge away and use the first-person disc projectiles for fighting enemies once you unlock the glove. The combat I find not to be too bad. It does feel a little stiff with the combos, but it works well, especially once you start upgrading things to make it easier. Though eventually, this game just turns into a stealth game. As you encounter alpha guards, they're extremely difficult to fight in the early game, requiring you to watch their patrols and either sneak past them or shoot weak points on their back, positioning them to be able to take them out without being spotted. The game goes decently in depth with the stealth rooms, especially when you get rooms with 3 or more enemies, making the whole take them out option mostly out of the equation. Now, it isn't terribly difficult to figure out what to do, and like many older stealth games, the AI is pretty dumb. You set off an alarm, just run around the corner for a few seconds and they think you're gone forever and drop the alert status. Even the bosses themselves aren't terribly difficult. Each one feels like a puzzle fight more than anything else. They have a pattern with a specific way of fighting, like using an ally ability to stun them into being able to be damaged, or toppling a robot to expose its core. And like I said before, the earlier bosses feel designed around the new ability or item you obtained in its dungeon. The difficulty of this game doesn't necessarily come from the game itself, but from its age. It plays well, though it is a bit on the clunky side. The combat combos feel a little stiff, and the camera is a bit of a menace when it comes to small areas. I found a good number of places where I would jump down into a small path while in combat mode trying to hide from guards, and the camera would just be stuck on walls or Jade herself. Another thing is something I wouldn't necessarily call a downside, but this game only has a single manual save slot. The game autosaves often, making it very convenient when you die in a room and don't have to reload your last hard save, but it's worth noting that going to the off-planet portion of the game is the point of no return, meaning if you didn't complete all of the side missions before going there and you don't have an autosave from before you made that choice, you can lock yourself out of a lot of side content with no way to go through it outside of completely restarting the game. Though the online save option is a bit of a buffer here, you can technically upload 5 different save files to the cloud if you wish, so you could use that to have multiple save files instead of just the one. But despite these things, I had a lot of fun with this game and I think the gameplay loop is well done. You don't have that many missions, but you spend a lot of time there and there's a lot of different things the game lets you do. Like I saw when I first researched the game, it's pretty unique in that it doesn't solely dedicate itself to just one genre. It's a mashup of a lot of different things. It'll also use up a good bit of your time as we get to content and length. I didn't really do that much side content outside of just what I needed for story upgrades, and it took me about 15 hours to get to the end and see the credits. A bit longer than the 10 to 11 hours the How Long to Beat website claimed it was. Next up is presentation, which I think looks just fine. It's clearly a PS2 era game, but the environments and models are smoothed out and look quite nice, especially in handheld mode. When we get to performance, it's mostly very good. The Switch version locks itself down at 30 FPS, which it keeps for almost the entire journey. The frames do dip in some cinematic scenes and a couple areas where there are more effects going on, like hiding in fog and mist while stealthing past guards. But they're all pretty minor, and it's otherwise a well-optimized game. And now we get to battery life. Beyond Good and Evil gives the original and light models a battery range of about 2 to 3 hours, while the V2 and OLED models get about 4.5 to 6 hours. In conclusion, Beyond Good and Evil is finally available on the go and is a pretty good little action adventure with photography and stealth thrown in. Now on the downside, the game is a little clunky, especially with the camera movement, and there are some small frame dips here and there in a few areas. But if you're okay with minor frame dips, it looks great and is something I had a lot of fun playing through. Reviews to Go rates Beyond Good and Evil 20th Anniversary Edition for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.